This story has been recorded at an Addictive Eaters Anonymous meeting in New Zealand. You can email us at contact@aeanz.org.
And tonight is the first Friday of the month, so we have a speaker. And please, Di.
My name's Di and I'm addicted to food.
Hi.
Grateful to be at a meeting, not to be eating. I believe I was born with this disease because I can remember from a really young age eating in ways that made me feel uncomfortable. And when my father pointed out that it was disgusting that I was on my third plate of ice cream, I didn't disagree, I totally agreed, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to stop it. You know, if I might be able to not do it the next night or the following night even, but for sure the third night I would definitely be getting up and going out to the freezer to get another plate, coming back, eating that, and going out to the freezer, getting another plate. And I tried to make it as, what's the word? Milk in glass bottles, silver top, you get the cream on the top. So I used to hope that nobody had opened the milk bottle with the silver top. So I could do that and I could pour the cream on my ice cream because it would make it even more exquisite. My growing up years are filled with how I ate and, auntie and uncle. I am a farmer's daughter, so if auntie and uncle come to visit from town, we're definitely having a roast lunch for Sunday. And whenever we had a roast, I just love roast potatoes, so, my plate, I had enough food on my plate, but I always wanted more. And so when it came to my brother and sisters, we had to nominate who was going to scrape the dishes, who was going to wash and who was going to dry. I always wanted to get my hand up first and say I'd scrape because it would mean I'd be able to pick leftovers. Yeah, and I never got more. I describe myself as being a little porky a couple of times in my life. I never otherwise got really overweight, but my stomach used to stick out. And, when I was in my teens, I used to make my own dresses, and I used to make a pattern that had puckers, just underneath the chest, because that was fashionable design. But my mother thought, she was horrified at that pattern because she thought it could hide a potential pregnancy. And it wasn't anything to do with that. It was because I knew my stomach stuck out. And I was embarrassed by that. It's not anything to do with how I ate that was my biggest struggle in life. It was how I felt about myself. I was a really self-conscious kid. I felt like, to me, it was as if my parents treated me differently to my brother and sisters, which isn't the case, but that's how it felt. And I just felt like I didn't know how to do life. But as I got into my teens and adolescence and young adulthood, you wouldn't have known that because I was misindependent, misconfident, miscompetent, and misopinionated, and miscareer woman. I had an opinion on everything, and you knew what it was. And I was very successful in life throughout my growing up years, so there was no indication of how I felt inside. I just felt like I didn't know how to do life, and I guess, it gets called low self-esteem. But I did do well in my education, and then I was a exchange student, so I went and lived in South Africa for a year, and I came back and completed my tertiary education. So, I'm following the path that you're supposed to follow. Except that when I get to 21, I don't think there's anything to celebrate, because I don't feel good about myself. And I don't want to celebrate it, but you cannot not celebrate your 21st, because then there's, how are you going to explain? So I agreed to have a dinner with my aunties and uncles and, a few of my friends. So, okay, that's what Di chose to celebrate her 21st. When I was doing my training to become an occupational therapist, I learnt about neuroses and psychoses, and I knew that I hadn't been psychotic, but I definitely identified with the signs and symptoms of neurotic behaviour, neuroses. And so that wasn't very reassuring. I mean, I couldn't tell anybody because I didn't want to fail my training. But yeah, I definitely identified. And so my life trucks along fine on the outside. I work for a couple of years, and then I do the big OE, leave New Zealand, go over to London, and start my sort of overseas experience years. During that time, I started to experience anxiety like I'd never experienced before. I'd spend all Sunday worried about going to work on a Monday. And fortunately, that experience passed, and I managed to get myself into a job that I somehow found myself, felt comfortable, and was presented as being competent and felt competent. But I had a bit of an argument with the boss one time, and so I decided, right, blow this, it's time I come back to New Zealand. And that's what I did after about 4.5 years, and I thought I was coming home, but coming back to New Zealand, it was like, I didn't feel at home. There was too much space between the houses, and the sky was too blue, and the houses are different colours, and things just didn't work out. Basically, I had my first nervous breakdown. Trying to fast track this story. Had my first nervous breakdown, and I didn't know what the heck was wrong with me. I wondered whether I had delusions of grandeur, schizophrenia, paranoia. I just didn't know, but I went to the doctor and he said, there's nothing you can do about it, just take antidepressants and you'll be all right. And I didn't think that was going to be true, but I didn't have a better option, so of course, I started taking antidepressants. And I'm thinking, if I can't get myself out of this hell that has become my life, because I've just had a nervous breakdown, I've just chucked my job and driven home to where my parents live, and I'm in my late 20s, and I've been living in London and living quite the life, and now here I am having a nervous breakdown, driving home and living with my parents. And my father's having a nervous breakdown. So I thought, well, I felt humiliated, and I used to look at young people and wish that I could start my life over again, but I was only, 25 or 26. And, in the back of my mind, an option was definitely to walk into the sea with a brick tied around my waist. But my friend said to me, come and start a new life in Christchurch. Right, okay, let's do that. I haven't got a better idea. And I had some friends living here. So that's what I did. And it took quite a few more years, about 7 or 8, after that first nervous breakdown, which included another nervous breakdown and an admission into a psychiatric hospital. Then admission into a therapeutic community, doing lots of self-help therapy, every form that I could think of to try and get my life sorted. And and of course I'm not employable. I'm a consumer of mental health services, and I get to have a diagnosis of depressive disorder, and I'm on and off antidepressants. I can remember one time I said to the staff in the community that I was living, I said the highlight of my day is the milk Milo that I make myself at night. Most of the staff have gone home. Or maybe all of them, I can't remember whether one of them slept over. But that's a highlight of my day, because if you put it in the microwave for long enough, you get the right amount of froth. And when I told them that, I felt like I was telling them everything there was to know about me. But of course they said to me, oh, well, what do you think the real problem might be? You know, do you think you might have low self-esteem and lack confidence? Oh, yeah, well, yeah, there's that too, yeah. If they had said to me, Di, there is a fellowship out there of people who, just like you, the highlight of their day is something that they eat, or something to do with food, and it's not like that for them anymore, I think that I would have thought, well, so what's that got to do with me? I don't think I would have thought, wow, that sounds really wonderful. How do I get to be a part of that fellowship? Because I just don't think that I would have been ready. It took another, few years, and actually, yes, I became involved in an organisation who provided activity programs for adults with mental illness. And I got employed within that organisation, and at that time I thought, oh great, the solution to my problem, I'm going to be employed again, and everything will be all right. I'll join a tennis club on the weekend and everything will be just fine. And I can remember, walking down the street, literally holding my head higher, because now I'm a respectable citizen because I'm working again. But it wasn't the solution, and I want to chuck that job in before very long, because I'm not coping. It's just stress that I don't need. But I was invited to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting by my that boss, and I thought, what a strange invitation to extend to a nice woman like myself. Don't we see enough of each other at work? And he'd only seen me drink once, but of course he could see the disease in me. And so I agreed to go to this lunchtime meeting, and he encouraged me to listen to the similarities, listen to the thinking and the feeling, don't listen to the differences. And I still think that was helpful advice to give me. And I can't tell you what the similarities that I heard were. I can only actually remember this woman's story that was nothing like mine. But whatever it was, I found out how to get to more of those meetings. And as I started to go to more of those meetings, which kind of indicated that perhaps I was an alcoholic, and I started to meet a lot of you, the people who are sitting in the room tonight. I started to meet you. I went up to one of you one night and said, what other meetings do you go to? Expecting to hear about what AA meetings you go to. And she revealed that she went to a 12-step fellowship to do with food. And I thought, oh my God. It was like the seed was planted. My eating has been like my drinking in many ways. I've eaten when I haven't wanted to. I've eaten what I haven't wanted to. I eat more than what I want to. I starve myself. I graze. I was not happy, actually, because I did not think it would be very glamorous to be in a 12-step fellowship for recovery from food addiction. I mean, it made Alcoholics Anonymous seem positively glamorous as far as I was concerned. But my sponsor was in both fellowships. So I used to talk to her about it, and I used to tell her how I didn't need to be in this other fellowship. And she'd say things like, well, Di, nobody's saying you do. Oh, okay then. And actually I dumped that sponsor because I thought if I got a sponsor that was only in AA, that would make it easier for me to avoid being in this fellowship. And so that took 6 months. And at the end of that 6 months, I knew that I didn't have the right sponsor, and I knew that I wanted to go back to this sponsor, this one that I'd had the previous 6 months. But I knew that would involve doing what she suggested. Anyway, I didn't know if she would take me back, but I think what happened is I rang her up and she suggested I ring her sponsor to talk about it, which I did. And anyway, she did agree to take me back, and that was part of... I'd been in AA for a year and I hadn't had a drink or a pill, but I was still a real misery guts. And I knew it was because of the food. I knew that there was a solution in relation to the food, but that I just hadn't, got bad enough, I suppose. To embrace the solution. And I heard that the solution involved putting down the food just like an alcoholic puts down the alcohol, coming to meetings regularly, trying to help someone else and, doing the steps. And while that message made sense to me, it sounded pretty, a bit hard and a bit extreme. So, I had been searching for an easier, softer way in that first year when I was just in AA and popping into the food fellowship. But I couldn't find an easier, softer way because I was so attracted to the recovery that I saw in you. You had a life between meals and you laughed and smiled and you just were happy. And, I wasn't happy, as, I was told I was in misery guts, which is true. And so, eventually I decided that living in the solution had to be better than living in the problem. That I knew that meant accepting, basically a weighed and measured food plan. And the funny thing was that by this time, I wanted it. And I remember meeting my sponsor at lunchtime in a cafe to be given this, food plan. And I was choosing what I was having for lunch from the counter, and it was just, oh God, I couldn't stand it because I couldn't decide. No, I didn't really want anything actually, but I'm supposed to have lunch, so get something. And it was like, I didn't, it just doesn't work for me trying to choose something from a counter of a huge variety of food options. And I think my sponsor actually said, oh, well, you won't be doing this anymore. And I thought, oh, great. It was like, oh, well, that'll be a relief. But I did feel like I was being given a buy from food diet, I must say. And I didn't want to go and have a big eat before I started, but I did want to go and have a coffee with milk in it because I knew that wasn't going to be part of the food plan. And actually, coffee with milk in was pretty much everything to me. I mean, I wasn't worth speaking to until I'd had my coffee in the morning. But anyway, so I guess I made a start, and But what I didn't tell my sponsor or anybody else was in the back of my mind, I was only going to do this thing for as long as it took to prove that it didn't work for me, because then I would be able to get on with what I really wanted to do, which was eat what I wanted when I wanted and run my own life. But there was just that little ounce of sanity there that said, well, actually, Di, that's what you've been doing for 37 years. You have been eating what you want when you want and running your own life. Right. So actually that doesn't work for me. So after about, 3 to 6 months, my sponsor suggested I get off the back fence and close the back door, much to my amazement. Well, I thought, how does she know? Because I hadn't told her. But much to my amazement, I thought that sounds like a good idea. I would have thought that my reaction would have been, how dare you speak to me like that? And, if, in a nutshell, that describes what has happened. I guess I've just gotten on with it. And I guess what that means is, I've come to meetings, I've turned up, I've come to meetings regularly. My sponsor took me through the steps, and everything that I heard in meetings, and from my sponsor and from talking to others, it was almost like the direct opposite message that I'd been hearing in the years preceding coming into the fellowship. Don't pick up the first one. Go and help someone else and get to meetings. It was like, what do you mean go and help someone else? How can I help someone else? I'm a misery guts, And I was told about a gratitude list, and I didn't feel like I had anything to be grateful for, because as far as I was concerned, my life was the pits. But because I was, told to do it, I had to come up with 10 things to be grateful for. And so I came up with things like, well, I've got my eyesight, I've got my hearing, I've got 2 legs, I've got 2 arms, I've got an electric blanket, and I've got a hot shower, and I've got a telephone, and I have got a roof over my head. I can remember walking down the street one day, and I saw someone in a wheelchair, and I thought, well, yeah, I am grateful that I've got my legs, and I can walk. So I started to, appreciate that actually those were things to be grateful for. And, I just had hope. I had hope that if I did what you all did, then my life could get better, like yours had gotten better. And I didn't have a good attitude. I'm really grateful this is an action program, because if I had to relied on, if I'd had to think that I had to like you, or if I had to want to come, I might not have been able to. But I heard to just keep coming, put your bum on a seat, don't listen to your head. I love all those sayings that I heard in early recovery, like don't go upstairs alone. And I heard about committee meetings and debating societies, and I thought, well, that describes me, that is my head. I can never make a decision because the committee meeting's just so active. And so, to hear just don't listen to your thinking. Just take the actions. Try and, go about your affairs in a way that God would have you. God's will. For me, I definitely understood was not to pick up the first one. And I tried to make my food plan more interesting than what it needed to be, because I was so angry down the food. Many of you have heard this many times, initially I wasn't living by myself, but when I was, I'd buy a pineapple, and then so I've got a whole pineapple to eat, so I've got to have pineapple for my fruit every night, and then I had pineapple in my brain all day. And, I realised that, well, I don't want pineapple on my food, my brain all day, so maybe it's better if I don't have pineapple, kind of thing. I wanted what was on offer here. I did think, well, what's the difference between doing the steps and all the counselling that I've done? But I guess you guys have done the steps, and so, I didn't sort of put my hand up and say, can I make a start on step 4 now, please? It was suggested to me, and I remember I was on holiday for 2 weeks and I wasn't going anything or doing anything, going anywhere. But I remember telling my sponsor I didn't have enough time. And so she suggested I spend an hour a day on it. Okay. And step 5, went round to my sponsor's place. I remember she talked to me about things that she did that made, that you don't tell other people. So, so she had my step 5, and my sponsor just worked me through the steps, step 6 and 7, 8 and 9, made direct amends. I would never have called myself a thief, but I did help myself to I helped myself to things that weren't mine, especially when I was a student, because I just had the attitude, well, I'm a poor student, so, everyone does it and I can do it, and it's fun to do it anyway. So, you pinch this and you pinch that. And I remember I didn't want to, when I made the amends for that kind of stuff, I didn't want to let the hospital board know that I was, a professional, because I thought I might get disbarred or whatever you say from the profession. So I wasn't going to include that piece of information in the amends, but my sponsor said, you've got to be totally honest, because if you're not, then you won't reap the rewards from, you'll still be carrying around that. And I can remember, I didn't discuss the amends I made to my mother. I was sitting opposite her at the table, and I just basically came out with, I'm sorry that I blamed you for everything, that's right. And I thought she'd say, there, Diana, what are you talking about? But that isn't what she said. She said, it's as if we couldn't do anything right for you, by you. And I thought to myself, oh, well, that is so true. That was so true. Nothing they did was good enough for me. One of the biggest joys for me of recovery is my relationship now with my mother. I think that, how can I explain the difference? Well, I'll give you another example of before I came to the program. I asked to borrow money because I thought this particular amount, $5,000, would mean that I could buy a house. And she said, well, I'll have to pay it back. I was like, oh my God, that was a part of the equation. So that never happened, thank God. One of the things my mother said was it would be really nice if I took an interest in her life. I thought, oh, okay. And those things happen now. So I know that I'm not cured of this disease. I feel like a member of the human race, and I can live within my own skin most of the time, relatively comfortably. In fact, no, I basically enjoy my life. And the program, the steps have given me a design for living that really works. You know, I don't feel like what do they say, a round peg in a square hole anymore. I just feel so incredibly grateful that I found a solution, and I don't want the food. The food is like, it's where it belongs. I fuel my body with my meals. The meetings, the fellowship, the steps, now it's all about, the I South Me, the second half of step 1. I'm just incredibly grateful. And another of the biggest joys for me in recovery is, being a part of, and seeing new people come in and get well too. Because I don't doubt, I still have a cunning, baffling, powerful disease, and there are not a lot of people sitting in the room tonight, and a lot of people, far more people, don't keep coming back than those that do. So I'm grateful that I have kept coming back, and I feel like I lead a useful life. I'm not crippled by self-centeredness. I'm not completely relieved of self-centeredness, but I'm not crippled by it. And the steps give me a way. If I get it wrong, I can make an amends. I can say sorry. And I want there to be people in the rooms when the next newcomer comes in and is looking for a solution. So it's my intention to be one of those people, so I'll keep coming back. Thanks for the opportunity to share.